Abel Green online from Creative Commons.
Hello from Olympia, Washington. So I've got just some intro slides. I'm going to go through them very quickly. Here's my contact information. If you want to talk more, always feel free to reach out. There's my email, and that's my Twitter feed. I'm at @cgreen on Twitter, where mostly I amplify other people's good work that's happening around the world in open education. I'm the director at Creative Commons for Open Education. I've been there about 7 years, just over 7 years. And so happy to answer any questions you have about CC or the licenses. This deck, of course, is under a CC BY license. I've sent it to the conference organizers, so they can make sure you get a copy of these, so you don't need to take notes. And I also want to acknowledge that this particular slide deck is a remix that I created with David Wiley for a different presentation in Maryland and New York a few months ago. So to quote my friend, education is about sharing. That's what we do. My background, if you don't know me, before I worked at Creative Commons, I worked in the United States community colleges in Washington State, and before that, I worked with the universities and the community colleges in the state of Ohio, and was faculty at Ohio State University, where I did my studies. And this is why we're educators, right? We educate because we're sharing knowledge. We're sharing some of ourselves. We're sharing information. We're sharing research. Education is fundamentally about sharing. And of course, in today's world, with the internet and with open licensing and with open access research, we can really share in an unprecedented capacity, except that we can't because there's copyright, and copyright is automatic. Nothing wrong with copyright. If you are an author, a creator, and you're creating a piece of music or a symphony or a movie or a book or whatever it is that you're creating, it's right that you have copyright on that. That's a good thing, and it's also your choice whether or not you want to share. And if you don't want to share, that's perfectly okay. There's a lot of people that don't. No harm, no foul. This presentation's not for them. So Creative Commons is about people that do want to share. And of course, it's optional. And so what the internet enables is interesting, right? About the last 15 or 20 years, most of what we've created in education has been born digital. We certainly still use print and other media as we're distributing or sharing materials, but there's a back-end digital file somewhere. We no longer record analog audio. We no longer have typewriters and then transcribe those to some other medium. We capture things, we build things digitally. And digital is interesting because when something is digital, you could store a copy and distribute the digital thing for near zero cost. That's mostly because of the internet, it's because of cheap disk space, and it's because of cloud computing and the supercomputers we have in our pockets with our smartphones. So the internet and digital enables sharing at an unprecedented scale, but copyright says unless you have explicit permission to get access to something, you can't. Now, there's a couple ways to get permissions. One is if you're in Canada, you've got something called fair dealing rights. In the United States, we call them fair use rights. Other countries have similar exceptions to copyright. Some don't. And so if something is all rights reserved copyright, where we're lucky, we've got some exceptions to copyright. And we'll talk about open licensing in a minute. So a lot of times people conflate open and free. They'll say, well, if I find something on the internet, isn't that open? Because I can get access to it. It's freely available. What's the problem? Well, open's not the same as free. Open is very different. So if you think about free, most of the content we find on the web today is already free. If you can find it on the web, it's probably freely available as long as it's not behind a login and a password. But we know that content could disappear at any time. And when we're integrating content or linking the content from our courses, it's a real problem when content disappears. Content can also flip on you and become a paid service. So content that was free today might not be free tomorrow. And if you don't have the legal rights to modify the work to meet your students' needs, maybe to translate it into a different language or to somehow modify it, so that it's in the instructional design that you want to meet your students' needs, then it might not work. So open is different then. It's not the same as free, precarious, rigid, could disappear on me content on the web. Free equals the permissions to do what you want to do. So when we're talking about open, oftentimes we're talking about these types of permissions. Now, if you don't like the 5 R's, that's okay. Don't use the 5 R's, but a lot of people do. This comes from Wiley, and he said, look, when we're talking about the permissions that make something open, in particular make content open, we're talking about these types of permissions, the legal rights to retain a copy, and nobody can take it away from you. So I can download it and I can keep it forever, and so can your students. The right to reuse it, to use it exactly as it is. The right to revise, to change it, modify it, adapt it, create a derivative work. The right to remix, so the right to take that Wikipedia article and that course from Camosun and remix it together into something new. And then the right to redistribute. So I create something and I can share it with everybody else, not only at your conference, but with everybody else around the world. So these are actually legal rights that you either have or you don't have. So Creative Commons, this is where I work. We are an organization, a nonprofit organization that's been around since 2001. And we create the standard open copyright licenses that the world uses to share. Now, all of these licenses are freely available. They always will be. To be certain about that, we've actually dedicated all of our licenses and other legal tools to the public domain using our public domain dedication called CC0. So even if our organization went away tomorrow, CC licenses are there forever. So we are a nonprofit. We don't charge for the licenses. We never will. It's not the point of our organization. The point of Creative Commons is to make it easy and legal to share when copyright holders want to share. Our licenses work in every country in the world. They sit on top of copyright. They respect copyright. They allow the copyright holder to keep their copyright and share under the legal terms and permissions that they choose. We're also a global movement. So we have chapters. We have a CC Canada chapter. We have a CC United States. There's CC Spain and CC New Zealand. They're all over the world in 89 countries. So if you ask yourself, well, why do we need Creative Commons? Why do we need open licensing at all? Well, this is why. On one end of the continuum, you've got all rights reserved copyright on the right side, and that's fine for people who the intention is not to share broadly. And for those of us that want to get access to those copyrighted resources, the first thing we look to is our fair use or our fair dealing rights. And we want to exercise those, expand those, maximize those everywhere we can. And we fight hard. Creative Commons fights hard to expand exceptions to copyright as well. But what if there's things you want to do with the work that either the user is the all rights reserved or the all rights reserved copyright holder wants to give the public access to? That's Creative Commons. So keep your copyright at a license. It's also true that for things to get from the right side of this continuum to the left side to get into the public domain, if you don't do anything to a copyrighted work, it takes a long time. And first, unfortunately, I'm going to have to die, and then 70 years have to go by past my death, and then my works go into the public domain. And if you're a corporation, you can get another 20 years on top of that. And so Creative Commons also has public domain tools where if you want to put your work in the public domain today and you're the copyright holder, you can do that through our public domain dedication called CC0. So with Creative Commons, you've got lots of options. You can put your work in the public domain right away. You can keep your copyright and add the license of your choice, or you don't have to share and you can keep copyright. And that's a nicer set of options for the general member of the public without having their own lawyer or understanding how to write their own licenses. And it's all freely available. So if you want to add a CC license to your work, and the open educational resources around the planet are CC licensed or they're in the public domain, these are your choices. So all of our licenses require attribution. That means you have to give credit to the author. And in the Academy, we understand that. When we don't give credit, it's called plagiarism, and we don't do that. And so giving credit or giving attribution is what we do. It's very easy to do with CC licenses. You just need to list the author, the title of the work, the source of the work, where is it, and the license. The other three conditions here are optional. You can use them or not use them. Share alike says if you use my work and you modify it, you have to share that new adaptation, that new derivative work under the same terms that I licensed my work under. So if you think about everything on Wikipedia, every Wikipedia article is under an attribution share alike license. Non-commercial is what it sounds like. You can use my work for free, you can modify it, you can redistribute it, but you may not sell it. So you can't make commercial use of my work. No derivatives is also what it sounds like. You can't make a derivative, or you cannot adapt my work. You can't change it. So no derivatives is something that we tend not to use in education because educators change stuff. That's what we do. We modify things to meet the needs of our students. So when you mix and match different CC licenses, you get one of these 6 different CC license combinations. You've probably seen these on the web. By is attribution. This book is by Cable Green. Share alike is SA, ND, no derivatives, NC, non-commercial. So when somebody says CC by NC, what they're meaning is the Creative Commons attribution non-commercial license. When we think about open education and education more broadly, kind of stack the public domain tools and the licenses up like this. And it's not that any of these are better than the others. This is mostly about definition and how much freedom you're giving to other educators and users around the world. And so I'm not here to tell you which license you should use. That's a personal choice that you'll have to think about and make your own decision. But I want to talk very briefly about what works for open education and what kind of works better for the most people. So first of all, on the right side, you can see some of these are OER compliant and some are not. So if you think back to the 5 R's definition, the legal rights to revise and remix are really important in the open education community. I want to be able to take a work and modify it to meet my needs and my students' needs. And I'd like to be able to take 2 different works, maybe one from that I found at eCampus Ontario, and another one that I found out of the University of South Africa. And I want to remix those 2 together. For something to be OER, I've got to be able to do that. So the 2 no derivatives licenses, even though they have their purposes for some audiences, in education, there's broad agreement that the no derivatives licenses do not make an OER because they don't allow you to revise or remix. So that would be my advice, would be stay away from the ND licenses if your intention is for something to be an open educational resource. All of the major OER definitions, UNESCO, Creative Commons, the Hewlett Foundation, Sparks, everybody's definitions pretty much exclude the use of ND. So that's just an FYI. The other interesting thing is kind of the order. So most freedom at the top to least freedom at the bottom. What we're really saying here is how much flexibility are we giving to other people, to other educators when they use our stuff? So public domain obviously is the most flexible because you don't even have to provide attribution if something's in the public domain. Of course, we still do because that's a best practice and we don't want to plagiarize somebody's work. CC BY just requires attribution, so that's real simple. And then you go down the list from there. So as you're thinking about which license you want to use, there's always a bit of a tension between what do I want to require others to do and what do I want to restrict from others from doing versus how much flexibility do I want to give them? And so if you want to get a good kind of sense of remix, if you go to your computers and type in CC remix chart, it'll show you which licenses you can remix with other licenses, and it'll kind of describe why this order makes sense. So we're very proud at Creative Commons. We're very involved with the open education movement. We like to say we put the open in OER because when you find OER around the world, it tends to have a CC license on it. And there's a lot of those works out there. So we just came out, this is from our recent State of the Commons report. If you go to your favorite search engine and type in State of the Commons, you'll find that report. It's also linked off our website. The updated numbers, these are conservative numbers, is that there are over 1.4, almost 1.5 billion CC licensed works that search engines can see on the web. and they can only see licensed works where people have used the machine-readable licenses, which most people don't. So what's important about CC licenses or open licenses more generally? It's that they provide everybody in the public perpetual, irrevocable permission. So perpetual, they last for the term of copyright, and when the term of copyright ends, those works go into the public domain, then you've got access to them anyway. And the license becomes null and void. So perpetual is important. Nobody can take it away from you. And irrevocable is that the copyright holder can't take it back. So when that's the they can't take it away from you part. If you're an educator and you are building OER into your curriculum, it would be extremely problematic if Cable Green changed his mind and said, I don't think I want a CC license on that chapter of my textbook anymore. I'm going to remove that. And everybody in the world that's using my chapter for my textbook has to now delete it or pay me for use. That would be problematic because now you've got big holes in your curriculum. And so CC licenses are actually irrevocable. Once somebody puts a license on something, it's out there until it goes into the public domain. So to get very specific about open educational resources is all this stuff. It's everything we use in our classrooms as we're teaching. When we talk about open, as we said before, we need to get specific, because it's one thing to talk about open is about access, or open is about inclusiveness, and open is about good design. It's about open practices and pedagogy, and all of those things are the most important things. Open is about those things. And if we're not specific about the permissions with the content we're using in our classes, the rest of that pyramid can fall apart on us. So if you are, for example, using all rights reserved copyright with open practices or open pedagogy, and the copyright holder says, hey, I didn't give you permission to use that, and you can't use it under fair dealing rights, they can yank that out from underneath you, and that creates problems in your classroom. So it's not an either or between open educational resources and open practices. Having both is actually really helpful. So my comments here are specifically about open educational resources, the content. The practices and the policy are also critical. We'll get to that in just a minute. So, we've got to have free access to the work, which eliminates the price barrier. And when we have open educational practices, open educational resources, it lets us get into the more interesting, the more meaningful conversations about open pedagogy. So to be specific about OER, this is the definition we use at Creative Commons, which I want to give attribution here. This is a derivative of the UNESCO OER definition. We just cleaned it up a little bit. So we say that OER are teaching, learning, and research materials. So it's everything we use in education in any medium. So it can be digital, it can be print, it can be any other medium you need, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license. So it doesn't have to be a Creative Commons license, but it has to be an open license. The open license has to have these characteristics: that it permits no-cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by anybody. And so if an OER has these characteristics, then we would say, yes, it's an OER. 9 times out of 10, this means it's in the public domain or it's got a CC license on it. So as an educator, when we're choosing copyrighted materials in our class, which of course we do sometimes, we have to realize that copyright's forbidding sharing, copying, giving everybody free access, modifying to meet our needs. When we choose open educational resources, what the internet enables, what digital enables, open actually permits. And that's exciting because when we talk about things like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically goal number 4, which is about education, and specifically it says ensuring that everybody in the world has inclusive and equitable access to quality educational resources and lifelong learning opportunities, we really need to be using open educational resources. We need to be engaged in open education practices, and we need to have the open education policies that back up and support the content and the practices. Now, the good news, this is kind of a one-slide summary of all the great research which has been done about open education. When we shift to content, and I'll just stick with content here. This is not research about practices, although there is research about practices as well. When we shift a course or a degree program to OER, access and equity immediately go up. That's a no-brainer. If the costs are zero, if you can make a digital copy for everybody for free and really cheap print copies, everybody gets a copy and you're immediately in a more equitable situation than you are today. Content can be current, it can be localized, and it can be improved. And that happens when content is OER. It's more problematic when you're dealing with lockdown, all rights reserved, copyrighted content. Learning outcomes go up, and that can be, it's measured in multiple ways in research. You can look at standardized test scores, they tend to go up. You look at the learning outcomes specified in the syllabus, students do better for a variety of reasons. Mainly, they all have access to all of the resources that the faculty have designed into the course for the students to be successful. It's a no-brainer that when students have everything that they need to be successful, guess what? They're more successful. Other interesting things happen, and this is where provosts and presidents get very interested, is that time to degree goes down. Course dropout rates go down. Why do those things happen? Well, first of all, students don't drop out. It's about 15% more students stay in because they've got the resources at the start of the course that they need to be successful. If you carry that to a degree program and tell the students all of your educational resources are freely available and we've taken those costs out of the program, then people, there's no reason to drop out, right? I've got everything that I need. There's other reasons they might drop out, but you've taken that reason away. And so when they don't drop out, to the extent they're paying differential tuition, as they often do in community and technical colleges and TVET schools, the institution actually sees more revenue coming in, which is helpful for all sorts of reasons. But mostly we care about the students, and they're able to graduate faster. They're able to meet those educational goals that they have. I get particularly interested in this bullet. Students become producers and co-producers of knowledge. It's much more interesting to go into a class and receive assignments to work on solving problems like sustainable development goals as I'm learning. And when the content is open, when the practices are inviting me as a student to engage openly in the content, that's more interesting. That's a CV hit or a resume hit for me. That's me contributing to the field that I want to go into. It's me solving problems in my community and in the world. That's interesting learning. And that's open practices. And then the last one here, knowledge is shared freely and globally. Why not engage our students in part of the conversation about sharing throughout the academy? Two last bullet points, or three last points here, which are a bit off from open education resources and from the licenses. This gets into policy. So generally speaking, we argue at Creative Commons that all publicly funded resources should be openly licensed by default. So when a national government or a provincial government funds the creation of educational resources, or commissions educational resources to build, or funds academic research to be done, we are, and many other organizations argue as well, that those resources should either be put immediately into the public domain, or they should have a permissive open license on it so that the public has access to what the public paid for. We think that only makes sense. We're seeing a lot of success in that area, by the way. Next offer here is we've got something at Creative Commons called the Open Education Platform. Several of you have already joined that. I want to extend the invitation to all of you. If you just go to any search engine and type in Creative Commons Open Education Platform, the first link will be a blog post with information on how to join. This is an international platform. We have, 755 people around the world, I think now, from over 70 countries, including several people from Canada, who are discussing what projects they want to work on together. We've been at this for about a year now. We've just finalized the goals that we have. Actually, they're not finalized yet. We're about to, in our next meeting, we will finalize the goals. And then we're going to move into a phase where we start to pitch ideas to each other about what we want to work on together. We'd love to have you be part of that conversation. If you just want to join the listserv and listen and lurk, that's perfectly okay. If you want to become more active, we welcome you into that conversation. Last thing I want to share is we just launched a new program at Creative Commons called the CC Certificates. And this is at certificates.creativecommons.org. We have certificates for librarians, certificates for educators. We're in the process of building CC Cert for government and a CC certificate for GLAM, and we'll be building a CC certificate for researchers. We're also building a continuing legal education certificate. So the idea here is that we have learned over the last, I don't know how long we've been around, 17 years, that Creative Commons staff and the amazing people in the Creative Commons chapters around the world trying to teach everybody and have sessions like we're having today simply doesn't scale to the demand that's out there. And so what we want is for all of you in the room to be able to take this, rigorous 10-week online course and for you to get CC certified so that you feel confident in going out and teaching others, that you've got the latest and greatest information, that what you're sharing about copyright and the commons and the values of the commons and CC licenses and how open licensing is deployed in research, GLAM, education, et cetera, is not only current but accurate. And this goes for CC staff as well. We're all taking the certificate because as we built it, we're like, wow, we'd kind of forgotten about that. So we invite all of you to take this. That's the good news. The bad news is yesterday we sold out all of our seats in 2018, but you can still get on wait lists. And if you get on the wait list, we will queue you up for being on the first classes in 2019. We launched 8 sections in 2018 and they filled up in about a month right after the CC Summit. So we're very pleased to see that there's a demand out there and a lot of demand and more demand than we have capacity for. But in addition to offering the certificate, it's also a pathway for you to become an instructor. So Jenny, a good friend of ours, is sitting in the room, and Jenny is not only going to be CC certified, but she has indicated that she wants to be an instructor as well and help teach more people in Canada. So if that's something you're interested in, that's part of the CC certificate program if you want to, and we will be paying our CC cert instructors $3,000 US every time they teach a course. So we're not asking people to volunteer. We're going to pay them for their time. Thanks, everybody. I'll stop. If we still have time for questions, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Cable. All right. Any questions for Cable? You can just shut them up.
I'm just wondering if that course, is it asynchronous, synchronous? Is that hard?
So we've got 2 versions of the certificate right now. One is an asynchronous 10-week online course. And so it doesn't matter what time zone you're in. There are 6 modules in the course. It's kind of like one module every couple weeks, give or take, or every week and a half. And when I say it's rigorous, not only is the content's there's not that much content, but what's rigorous about it is that because we as an organization are going to stand behind you as being CC certified, we need to know that you actually know this stuff. And the way that we're going to test that you know it is there are performance-based assessments. And so you actually have to build things to show that you know how to put an open license on something. You have to create a remix and show that you know how to give proper attribution. You need to show that you know how to use platforms on the web that use open licensing and actually use their tools. And the good news is that you can kind of build anything you want to build, and we encourage people to build what you already need for the work that you're doing. So we strongly encourage you to double dip. Whatever it is that you need to build for your job, or you want to build, or you've always wanted to build to educate others or share with your class, please build that stuff and just submit that for the course. But that being said, you do need to build. So that's all asynchronous. The other option is what we call a boot camp. So some people have said, hey, 10 weeks, I don't have 10 weeks, but I've got a week. And I can dedicate a week. And so we're going to do face-to-face, 1-week-long boot camps. Now, there's still going to be some online work in front of a boot camp, maybe a week or 2, because we can't crunch 10 weeks of stuff and performance into 1 week. But we're going to crunch as much as we can. So if, for example, your institution or your province wanted to do a boot camp, we would bring a CC instructor. Boot camps are capped, I think, at 20 people. Online courses are capped at 25 people. And so we can do a 1-week boot camp. That obviously is synchronous. Online courses are $300 US. Boot camps are negotiable depending on how much of the cost you want to pick up locally in terms of food and housing for people and transportation to dinners and all that stuff. We also will be having different prices for the global South because $300 is simply too much money for an online class. And so we're setting up essentially scholarship programs for the South.
Any other questions for Cable?
I was talking to some people about the idea of encouraging openness, and something in your presentations kind of brought that idea back, and it was the idea that they didn't want, and this is, in a nursing program, to engage in openness because they're worried about plagiarism. If I get my students, like you've done, to openly CC by a license the material, they post it on a blog, somebody else for that assignment takes that, technically could just hand it in. So I hear you saying they have to cite it, but how would you respond to somebody whose concern is around promoting plagiarism in courses if you use the reusable assignment?
Yeah, it's a good question. It comes up a lot. So the short answer is that bad people are going to do bad stuff regardless of copyright or licensing. So if I'm going to plagiarize, and that's something I'm doing intentionally, frankly, I don't care if it's all rights reserved copyright or if it has a CC license. I'm plagiarizing. I'm putting myself at academic risk. And so copyright violation is the least of my concerns. And so that's mainly the answer. It's also true that when people put CC licenses on things, it's a bit of an educational moment for people who might have considered plagiarizing, because with all rights reserved copyright, it's something that we see all day long on the web, and so mostly people ignore it. And they grab stuff, free stuff, and they do whatever they want with it. And we all copyright violate all day long. When they see a CC license, they see that little logo, and sometimes it's new, and they click on it, and it brings up the license deed. And because it's only a page long, and it's written at a grade 6 level, and they can read it in their language, oftentimes people go, oh, what am I allowed to do, and what am I not allowed to do? And it's actually a learning moment where they say, oh, if I use this, I have to give attribution. I guess I have to do that. Whereas with an all rights reserved copyright statement, there's kind of no information for me. That's one answer. Another answer is, answer number one, if people want to do something bad, copyright's not going to stop them, and neither is open licensing. The other answer is more nuanced, and that is the Creative Commons licenses have protections built into them for the licensor. So if I'm the copyright holder and I put a CC license on it, I'm the licensor, and you, the user, are the licensee. If you take my work, the first thing is that you, under no circumstances, are allowed to say that I endorse what you're doing with my work. You just can't do it. The license is prohibited. So you can use my work, you can modify my work, you can do whatever you want with it as long as it's not an ND license. But you cannot say, under any circumstance, Cable Green approves of this derivative work or approves of my use. You can't do it. If you do that, the license becomes null and void, and you cease and desist immediately. The other thing is that if I don't like what you've done with my work, I can require that you remove attribution back to me. So if you take my work and you put it in your blog and you change my words around, and I look at it and I say, look, that wasn't my intent, you're misrepresenting me, I don't like what you did, I can actually contact you and say, hey, I'm exercising the license and I want you to remove attribution. Now, I can't require that you take it down, but I can require that you remove my name and remove the link back to me, and now I'm no longer associated with that work. And then I guess one third point is that in the Commons, there's a lot of goodwill, and this really doesn't happen very much. I've been at CC for 7 years, and I've been pulled into maybe 3 disputes that were like this. And usually the end user said, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't know. And I didn't give attribution the way I should have. I fixed it now. Or I apologize for representing it the way I did. I didn't mean any harm. Let me make a modification so that I'm not upsetting the copyright holder. And so usually that's the case. Educators want to do right by each other, especially when somebody has added a CC license to it. That's a great gift that somebody has made, and other people want to respect that and show gratitude by doing the right thing.
All right, Kay, well, thank you for giving us a lot of information to synthesize here.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.